Good evening, everybody. My name's Hannah Kay, and I'm the executive producer at Intelligence Squared. A very warm welcome to all of you here at St. Martin's in the Field in London, and all of you watching on the live stream, wherever you are in the world. I hope we'll be getting some good questions from you later on in the Q&A. And tonight, we are hugely honoured to welcome Nick Cave and Seán O'Hagan to this wonderful space. Nick, of course, is the songwriter and lead singer of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And in recent years, he's been engaging more with his fans, especially through his website, The Red Hand Files, where each week he answers a letter from amongst all the many that are sent in. Seán is an award-winning journalist, and he's a freelance writer on arts and culture for The Observer. The two of them have known each other for over 20 years, and it was back in deepest lockdown in 2020 when they started a series of recorded conversations that were transcribed and published into a book called Faith, Hope and Carnage. And it offers a glimpse into Nick's inner world and touches on love, grief, loss and religion. And they're here with us tonight to carry on the conversation. But now, please give a very warm welcome to Nick Cave and Seán O'Hagan.
Thank you. Hello.
Some familiar faces in the front row. Follow us around everywhere. Thank you all for coming. Before we start, we just agreed we should... The event is somewhat shaded by sadness tonight because of the news of the death of Seán MacGowan, who is a close friend to both of us, and very upsetting news. In fact, the first time that you met Seán was when I brought him to that infamous interview in 1989 for the NME, and they've had a very, very strong friendship and relationship ever since.
Yeah.
So it's a great genius, as we all know. I mean, you can talk about his songwriting better than I can, but a sad day.
Yeah, it's a very sad day today. We knew he was ill for a long time, but and you prepare for these sorts of things, but it was a shock.
Yeah.
It's a shock, and you know, the world's lost a great artist, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a great human being in some ways.
Sorry,
and a great human
very
being.
Echoey here.
It's incredibly echoey.
Yeah. But say that again.
And a great human being.
Yeah. I mean, there was something. I don't know if people know. You know, his reputation precedes him in a way, but Seán was an incredibly kind, sort of generous, pure spirit, and just an extraordinary person, an extremely funny guy, and just, in my view at least, the songwriter of his generation. I don't know too much about Irish music. You probably know a lot more about it than I do, but I would say he's, you know, sitting up there.
Oh, for sure.
You know, within the whole historical context as one of the great songwriters.
Yeah.
Irish songwriters and great
songwriters per se, I think. Yeah.
General.
There's a sort of raw honesty to his work that I've never found anywhere else, really.
Yeah. He always had something that I didn't quite understand back then. When I first met him, was a genuine compassion towards people. You know, he was just kind to people. Even though he was caustic and sort of had this rough edge to him, he was enormously generous and kind to ordinary people.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
You know, and just an extraordinary guy. It's just very sad today.
Yeah. I have one story. You've reminded me of a story when I got a call from him once, and the Pogues were I think, #2 in the charts with Fairy Tale. And he said, oh, come and meet me in King's Cross, before it was gentrified. Come and meet me in the Wimpy Bar in King's Cross. We were living the dream in those days. And I remember I turned up, and he was always an hour late, but I suddenly noticed this commotion, and there was 2 guys who I thought were homeless, scrabbling about on the side of the road. And one of them was Seán. And he'd basically given money to a homeless person, and the notes had blown away. And the both of them were running around trying to. And I remember thinking, like, I can't imagine the Pet Shop Boys scrabbling around in the gutter on King's Cross. But it said something about his sort of authenticity.
I saw that a lot with him.
Yeah.
He would carry around a big roll of cash that he would just give to people, essentially.
Yeah. Anyway.
A beautiful person, and he'll be greatly missed, I think.
Yeah. We should go in. We're here ostensibly still a year.
We're still plugging this.
Year on. There's life
So
in the
good.
old dog yet. To talk about all the sort of themes that come up in the book. But we're also going to talk about music, which Nick is often reluctant to do, because I think you finished mixing a Bad Seeds album yesterday.
It came back mastered today, so that means, I don't know if you know what that means, but you mix the record, you make the record, no, you write the record, no, you get asked by your manager to make a record, so you write the record, and then you take it into the studio and record the record, and then you take it to someone and mix the record, and then you send it off, and someone masters the record, and that means it's ready to be released into the world, and it sounds fucking awesome. I mean, I'm just saying. It's been an extraordinarily difficult record to make for some reason. I remember Lou Reed saying something about, after a while, you understand that the next record will come and things just get easier. I've not found that to be the case at all. And each record just becomes more difficult to arrive at that place. And this record was extremely difficult, but it's really good.
That's not the feeling I got from you over the last few months. It felt very positive, and maybe you were on the last.
Well, I'd finished writing it. I'd finished. It's the lyric writing that's extremely difficult for me. Because I'm trying to say something with my lyrics. I'm not just trying to collect a bunch of songs together. I'm trying to sort of find the thing that I want to say, and that's quite difficult, record after record.
Can you talk about the thing you want to say on this record?
No.
Can you talk about the title of the record?
No.
Okay.
It's a great title, though. Fuck.
It is the best title yet. But it is a Bad Seeds record as opposed to...
Yeah, it's got all the Bad Seeds on it.
Yeah. And you've just got back from Buffalo, upstate New York, with David Friedman.
That's right. We usually, the way it's tended to be over the last few records is that me and Warren tend to mix the records. But this is a very complex record, and we sort of finally come to a sort of latter-day realization that we don't know what we're doing in the studio, and that we need somebody else to do it. So we took it to Dave Friedman, who's he used to be in Mercury Rev, and he did all the Flaming Lips records, and which are really beautifully put together, those records. And he mixed it and did a, amazing job. So
while you hung out.
Well, yeah, he had this weird. He had this weird way, which was extraordinary for me and Warren, who are a couple of complete control freaks about everything. He would say, in the morning, you mix it in like a shack in the woods, and in his studio in Buffalo, he said, well, what do you want this song? I'm going to mix this song today. What do you want it to sound like? And you're like, you don't play the song, you just sort of describe it to him like that. And he goes, okay, thank you. And he goes into the studio and he locks the door and doesn't allow us near the record. And then at 3 o'clock he comes out and says, I have something to show to you. And we, would you care to comment? And we go in and listen to it. It was just like, fucking hell, this is amazing. So we were really suspicious about this process to begin with, because we didn't really know what this guy could do, but he was amazing. And he turned songs that were difficult, sort of balancing acts into things that were really beautiful. So he's done an amazing job.
Meanwhile, you and Warren were hanging out in the Great Western.
Yeah, we just sit in the kitchen, kind of.
In the Great Western in Buffalo, the Great Western Hotel in Buffalo.
Yeah, stayed in the Best Western.
Best Western.
Yeah.
Living the dream, man.
Yeah, 2 stars. In fact, there was I got quite friendly with one of the cleaners there, and she
She's on
said,
the next record.
Huh?
She's on the next record.
Well, she might be, but she was this wonderful woman, and she was. The people in the Best Western were quite interesting, and she said, "So you're in a band? I hear you called the Bad Seeds, and why are you called the Bad Seeds?" And I said, "Well, because we're evil." And she goes, "You're not evil. I work at the Best Western. I've seen evil."
Brilliant.
I'm like, "Oh, okay." Have a nice night.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, we stayed there, and it was just an amazing experience.
And you recently finished, I was going to say a solo tour, but it was you and Colin from Radiohead. And I must say, I saw it in New York, and it was quite extraordinary, the difference between a solo piano concert by you and this guy playing quite minimal bass, but it was such an extraordinary difference he made to the songs.
Yeah, you said something like, that kind of kept going through my mind as I did future concerts. It was so lovely to hear him play, or you could really hear it when he wasn't playing, or something like that, which wasn't entirely encouraging, but it was an incredible experience too. I'm just got sort of triumph exhaustion or something at the moment.
So when you, just to go back to what you said, when you had this realization, what do you now think those preoccupations are?
Well, I mean, maybe this is clear to everybody, but it just wasn't clear to me as such. But the religious nature of the songs was just... it's funny because this priest or vicar came along to one of the shows that I'd met in London, and he'd never heard the band before, but he wanted to come along and in Minneapolis. And I kept singing the songs, and just about every second song had Jesus in it. And I kept thinking, fuck, this guy must think I'm sort of some religious nut. You know, that they were from the beginning, in a way, religious songs. There was that. And the idea of loss has always been there. So there was just a lot of themes that I feel that I've freshly engaged in, that I've actually been involved in from the start, you know.
It's hard for me to go back and look at some of the early songs as having those preoccupations. They seem much wilder and less,
they are
a bit more
they're
profane.
wilder, but so the intent is similar. The sort of idea of transcendence and the attempt of bringing the audience together in some way, whether it was in love or sort of contempt or whatever. It was the same idea in some kind of way. It was some sort of attempt to sort of shed the present day preoccupations and move to something, to step into something else. And we do that in different sorts of ways. But
is it ever difficult for you when you sit at the piano that you're not engaging, you're not out on the lip of the stage, you're not doing that?
Yeah, it's a little disconcerting because I sort of feed off the audience and feed off the expressions on people's faces and the communal nature of the thing. It feels like a sort of circular thing, and I'm not really watching the audience as I'm playing, so it's different.
And I know this record, it's obviously a Bad Seeds record as opposed to a Nick Cave, or indeed a Nick Cave Warren Ellis record. Does it conform in any way to the things that you talked about in here, like the improvisatory nature of music?
Yeah.
That's still at the core of what you do?
Yeah, it is, but I don't want to go into too much about what the record's like, but it's just insanely good.
Okay, the hint is taken. So, in terms of the book, I can't even remember how. Is it a year? It's over a year since it was published.
It's becoming a little obscene now that we're still talking about it.
And it's about 2 or 3 years since we did it.
Yeah.
So that's quite a lot of time. Have you ever read it?
The book?
I actually haven't read it since it came out. I dipped into it, but I sort of go.
Well, you mean read it from beginning to end?
Yeah, sit there and pour and make notes. I don't know. No, I don't feel the urge to dip into it very much. Sad to say. What about you?
No.
Good. Do you listen to your own records?
No.
No. How do you
Except the last one, because it's so good.
How do you feel? Has your feelings towards it changed?
I do open it up sometimes and have a look, and I'm surprised by it, and I like it. I think it stands up. I'm interested to see what I was thinking about back then has now changed to some degree, or things move on, but the thing I love about the book, and I'll be eternally grateful to you for, is engaging me in a conversation that allowed me to sort of consolidate all the sort of random thoughts that were just floating around in my head about all manner of things in conversation. And I'd just never really done that before. You know, we sat down and had a conversation about things that I'd never talked about, essentially. I mean, I'd written things in the Red Hand files and stuff, but never really had any pushback or anyone pushing the thoughts on. And I love that about the book, that it starts in one place and ends somewhere else. Much more interesting, much more deeper, much more meaningful through the process of conversation. I've said this before, but the thing about this book for me is that it is a testament to the value of the necessary value of conversation.
And why do you think that, I kind of know the answer to this, but why do you think that is so important right now?
Because this has changed a little bit, I think, from when we were talking about that in the book. But I feel that certainly at the time of talking about that, I thought that the idea of conversation was being looked at with suspicion. That the idea of an open conversation was starting to be looked at as something that was a kind of dangerous thing to do. And I just felt very strongly that that wasn't the case, and that we need more speech rather than less speech. And I was very concerned with that at the time. I'm not so sure I'm so concerned with that now. I think things are changing and people are kind of, growing a little tired of that. But I mean, the internet's flooded with podcasts with people having, open, good faith conversations and so forth. So I think that the tide has turned in that respect. But I think when we were writing it, there was still that feeling of you needed to be careful about what you talked about. And
you have, in the Red Hand Files, in the book, and in a lot of these conversations, become, I hope I'm not presuming too much here, but you've become more adept at speaking and articulating your loss, your personal loss with Arthur, and even with Jethro later, though he wasn't sort of, that happened after the book. Has that happened through the actual doing of it? Through the fact that you were given a sort of format or a forum to clarify your thoughts?
Yeah, I just found it's a funny thing to write about loss. It's even though you're being open, it's also a kind of obscuring mechanism to the way that you actually feel. If you can sort of write about it and talk about it and articulate it, it keeps the actual feelings weirdly at bay, I noticed. And that there's deep sort of chasms of grief that talking doesn't really help. And so, on some level, to keep talking is just to hold the feelings and this new world at bay in some way. But I don't know what I don't really know what I mean by that, except that sometimes it's not the talking that is the thing that eventually leads you out of the darkness. It's the humanness of people and small acts of kindness and practical matters. And I mean, I don't really. Maybe this is not the right. Victoria rang me today, Shane's wife. And I could recognize that situation she's in, of thousands of people coming around and everyone making demands on her because people are so upset. And it really ultimately is the small, silent acts of kindness that you barely see happen that are the things that draw you out of yourself. I'm talking about someone making you a cup of tea. And all the language that I've grown quite good at talking about is a thing for another time. It's a thing for something where you've gotten beyond, where you can reflect. The way I talk about it is sort of reflection, I think. You pushed me in the book to talk about what actually happened, and you wanted me to talk about what happened on the day that Arthur died. Well, you were concerned that I was talking forever from the other side of the chasm, let's say.
Yeah.
And that was suddenly, shockingly difficult. And I realized that I'd never actually, for all the language, I'd actually never really talked about those things. So,
do you regret that?
No, I don't regret it, but
difficult stuff.
Yeah, it was something to hear Victoria today. It really brought it. It was.
Yeah, take you back there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about these things and they hit you, but they don't hit you And talking to Victoria, it really hit me that Shana died, because he was sort of reflected through her feelings. You know?
Yeah. And loss is kind of embedded in this book, the idea of it. And recently you did I thought a quite amazing podcast with a woman whose name now escapes me, Krista Tippett.
Yeah.
And you said there that you felt now that loss was, you can put this better than me, but it was a defining condition of our lives. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, that's personally how I see the way we are as human beings. I think I don't think the condition of life is greed or power, yeah, or tyranny, or these sorts of things. I don't think that's what, or oppression. I don't think these are the things that define what we are as human beings. I sort of reject those notions, and I think that there is a commonness about us all that is to do with loss, and I think that's born into us. It's our condition of life, that we're bright things born into loss. And I don't mean that in a depressing way. I mean loss very much, not just in historical loss or our collective loss as a society, or our ultimate personal loss and the loss of the people around us. I don't mean that in a depressing way. I think that's understanding about things is what gives our life substance and meaning. It's that fundamental understanding that we die. I don't agree with the concept of the denial of death. It's an acceptance, I think, of death, that we have a fundamental understanding of that, whether we can talk about it or not. It's there in our blood and bones, and these things that we do, art or religion or these sorts of things, are a kind of celebration. They're not a denial, but rather a celebration of the meaning of what it is to live in such a precarious situation.
Yeah, and I take it you don't. I think you've said this before, but you don't feel that the idea of closure or even acceptance really applies as we understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Krista Tippett.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm having
You're like me. Two old guys trying to remember names.
I objected to the word closure, and I think she made a comment that word had long been sort of debunked as this idea of closure is ridiculous.
Is it not what people crave for, though?
Well, I don't want closure. I don't even look for acceptance. I just think it's a living part of what I am. These losses and all the losses are a living part of the fabric of what I am. It's not something that I can, have closure with and put over there, and then continue my life as it was. It's not. It's not as it was, nor should it be.
Could you have gotten through this or dealt with it had you not had the religious aspect of your life, the deep religious dynamic that you have?
I get quite nervous when you say deep religious.
Well, it's certainly deep.
Because it is deep and it's religious, but it doesn't mean what that feels like it means.
Okay.
And that's a sort of a certainty about these matters. I know a lot of deeply religious people, and they're fundamentally different. They seem fundamentally different than I am in regard to religion. I feel very conflicted in regard to religion, but I do feel that I move or inch towards some kind of spiritual truth. I'm not there yet, but it feels fundamental to the way I am and the journey that I'm on. But, it's like, it's not without its deep skepticism and doubt and,
I thought
and I mean, and this is something is often misunderstood too. I find out how I'm misunderstood through the red hand files, because people send in questions and they say, well, now that you're a Christian, or something like that, or even worse, now that you're a Tory, I keep getting. And I'm like, what the fuck? Where did that come from?
So you got that one from me?
I mean, I guess these things I don't go on social media, but these ideas must be coming from social media because they're so stupid.
Well, you did say, I think probably jokingly, that, to be a conservative was the thing to...
Well, I used the word conservative some time ago to talk about a way of approaching the world, and that was immediately seen as being a Tory, and that didn't even occur to me, so I object to that, and I just want to set the record straight. I'm UKIP.
Oh God.
Oh, he's UKIP. He's UKIP.
Yeah, I was just seeing chasm opening.
No, I'm not.
Well, that's a relief.
No, but I mean, I don't know where we are in the conversation now, but
you're not a conservative and you're not a Christian.
Well, the word conservative for me has something to do. We have to sort of look at it in a different way, and I was trying to just describe what I felt the conservative temperament might be, and to me, it has something to do with the soul. I know in your mind you couldn't imagine such a thing, but it has something to do with a depth of understanding about our society and a kind of stewardship over the traditions of our society in some kind of way, and that they have some intrinsic value. That's all. That they're not set in stone, but they are worth protecting and expanding. So because the conservative temperament has something to do with a kind of melancholy, soulful feeling towards the world, or a fundamental understanding of loss, in that the things that we lose, it's very easy to lose things and very hard to get them back. And so that's what I was really talking about in regard to a conservative nature, the fundamental desire to conserve in some way the collected wisdom of the world. And, I don't think that makes me a Tory.
No.
Is that you or me?
That's God is in the house. Or Marx is in the house, perhaps.
So anyway, I don't know why we're talking about that, but we were talking about...
No, I find it interesting that you talk about... Well, let's move on to God and Christianity. You talk about the traditionalism of Christianity. You practice, you go to church.
Yeah.
But if someone calls you a Christian, you immediately recoil in horror.
Well, that's because I recoil with horror when someone says they're a Christian. Someone comes up to me and goes, "Hey, I'm a Christian." I go, You know, it worries me. I react. The skeptic in me is the sort of my default setting, and it always has been. And I have part of my interest in church and interest in the sort of mystical nature of these sorts of things is that journey taken away from that skeptical person, that, you know, that default setting that I have of suspicion and skepticism about these sorts of things. Because I feel that when I do move away, when I shed that skepticism, something happens to me that is really is a transcendent thing. It happens. And for me personally, I find that in a church. I get that in a church. I get that within a Christian ceremony, for example. Because I always have, as a child really, responded weirdly to the story of Christ. I'm not quite sure why. And it's that narrative story that exists within the Christian religion that sort of draws me to it in the way that I'm not drawn to other religions. I'm not really drawn to the abstract nature of God, let's say. I feel uncomfortable to sit. It needs that human element, and I think that that's what that interests me about the Christian story.
It's essentially a human story, I guess.
Yeah, it's a human story that I relate to very strongly, and different parts of that story through different periods of my life.
I've always felt, looking at it slightly detached, having had a religious upbringing. It's hard to go back into that, but in a detached way, I always think of faith as essentially private.
Yes.
But you say it's a communal thing that you like.
Well, it is a communal thing to be part of a church service, obviously. And there's great benefits in that, and I think people get a lot out of that. But I'm much the same as you. It's a private matter for me as well.
And the deepening of the faith I talked to...
I mean, sorry, but what I've noticed happening... We can get off this subject soon.
Yeah.
But what I have noticed happening is there is a movement towards Christianity that disturbs me, which is a politically motivated movement towards Christianity that I've noticed amongst people that feel like they can use Christianity as some sort of firewall or bulwark against the current cultural moment or other fundamentalist religions or whatever, and I see Christianity being used in that way, and that's not my interest in Christianity. My interest in Christianity is, as you say, entirely personal and emotional. It's an emotional thing.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing in the book where you talk about the prescience of songs and that they can almost foretell certain things before they happen. And I just listening to you, it seems like that preoccupation you've always had with God and the songs and all, kind of on a bigger level foretold where you were going, foretold your journey.
Say that again.
The notion that a single song, for instance, can be prescient.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
That can be applied to the realization you had recently with Colin that...
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I mean, that's quite right. I mean, it was doing that. You know, it's playing very old songs, and they felt very new to me. They felt like they were addressing exactly the things that were sort of preoccupying me. It was quite a beautiful thing. Yeah. It's a very beautiful show to perform, you know.
And your work rate seems quite, I mean, it's always been prodigious, but has it accelerated as you've got older? It appears that way to me, but maybe it was always thus.
My plan is to sort of strip it back or strip it down, because there's all these extracurricular things that are going on. But the thing is, the more well-known you get, the more interesting the things that come in are, you know, like that people want you to do or collaborate with or get involved with, you know. So it's hard. It's hard to.
Is it hard to balance that reflective life you talk about? And
well, exactly. This is the problem with touring. It's very hard to have your life is eternally interrupted by your creativity, actually. Certainly touring. I find I'm always having to sort of go back to the place I was at before I went on tour. Going on tour is a sort of spiritual thing in itself, of course. It's a religious thing to some degree too, but I always feel like it sort of prevents any personal forward motion.
How is it a religious thing?
I think for me it's religious because of what it's trying to do, which is to collect a group of people together and lift them up, and strip them of the sort of the mundaneness for a moment and lift them up into something that's communal and moving toward what could be called God or whatever you want to call that, but moving towards something outside oneself.